This is not something that she did a poor job on. This is not something that she was too progressive on. This is not something that she was too woke on or too far left on. This is not one of those things. Again, like, my issue is definitely going to be with a lot of the progressive rhetoric and a lot of the ways that progressives didn't vote. This is not it. This is not it. This is not one of those things. I don't know what Sam's talking about.
Welcome to the Making Sense podcast. This is Sam Harris. So the reckoning has arrived. Donald Trump has been reelected President of the United States, and it seems like he's going to have both houses of Congress. Of course, we know he already has the Supreme Court. And the question is, what to make of all this? Why did he win, and why did the Democrats lose? Well, first, we should acknowledge that this is the greatest comeback in American political history. It's as if Nixon got reelected to a second term after Watergate. It's better.
Yes, that's it. Yes, that is a great fucking analogy. That is a great analogy. Yes, it's like Bill Clinton got reelected after having sex in the fucking Oval Office, and they just reelected the fucking person.
Better than that, or worse, depending on what you think about Trump. Luckily, I hedged my bet here, and I never said anything too critical about the man. I've always been very respectful of him and Elon and the other innovators they have around them. I mean, let's be honest, these guys just want to make America great again.
Yeah, of course.
Just give them a chance.
True.
All kidding aside, I will let you know when I receive my first audit from the IRS. But what I think is needed now is an honest assessment of why Trump won. Because it says a lot about our country that he did. It says a lot about how divided we are. It says a lot about the state of the media and the effects of social media. But above all, it says something that the Democratic Party and our elite institutions need to hear. Now, obviously, Trump's win and Harris's loss were determined by many factors. And I think everyone's in danger of believing that their pet issue explains everything that happened on Tuesday. Now, you could certainly make the case that it was immigration and the southern border, or it was inflation and the cost of groceries. You could even say it was the way Trump responded to that first assassination attempt, which, among other things, prompted Elon Musk to endorse him within minutes. Or it was Harris's weakness as a candidate and the way the Democratic Party coronated her, rather than allow some competitive process to happen.
Yeah, I think that there's like a lot of the things that he's saying are a lot of things that are true, but there is no like real one reason for his win, except that he was just willing to lie more than everybody else. Like, that is just the big difference maker. Is he is willing and capable of lying more than everyone else, and that he was just able to get away with a whole lot more bullshit because he was willing to do a whole lot more bullshit.
Or you could say that the blame lies with Biden himself and his disastrous decision to run for a second term. That was pure hubris. And of course, this blame extends to all the people who covered for him and lied to themselves or to the public about his competence for over a year. Some of this culpability fell on Harris herself. What did she know about Biden, and when did she know it? She never had a good answer for that question.
She didn't.
Or to come to one of my hobby horses, it was her failure to have anything like a Sister Souljah moment where she could put some distance between her current self and the Kamala Harris of 2019, who seemed to be in lockstep with the far left of the Democratic Party. The truth, of course, is that all of these things contributed, and if one or two of them had changed, we would have had a different result. But the Harris campaign
There's
and the
no one in the
Democratic
waiting
Party,
room.
in the last 100 days before the election, weren't in control of most of these variables. They could have messaged differently about all of them. I think it would have been possible to talk about inflation and immigration better than they did.
I was about to say, bro.
But their real failure, in my view, was to...
I was about to say, they had the ability to change a lot of this stuff, and the way that they talked about it, their messaging was atrocious. because they had the truth on their side. They had the stats on their side. They had actual evidence on their side. They had the ability to like continuously talk about this stuff. They just chose not to. But but again, yeah, like you're always going to be in a much more difficult position when you're willing to lie at a much higher rate than literally everybody else. So
to not pivot to the political center in a way that most people found credible. So to return to my hobby horse, I think there are some lessons that the Democrats really must absorb from what is undeniably a total political defeat. They simply have to recognize that several planks of their platform are thoroughly rotten. Identity politics is over. No one wants it. Latinos and blacks don't even want it, as witnessed by the fact that they moved to Trump in record numbers. Trump got a majority of Latino men nationwide, and in some counties he got a majority.
Yeah, I was about to say, bro, he still didn't get a majority of Latinos. He didn't get a majority of black people. So it's not as if like there's something like serious there that you gotta contend with. Like the Democrats still get the majority of those people. If we're talking about some sort of democratic process where you're looking at what the way that the majority of people are voting, yeah, the majority of Democrats or the majority of black people and the majority of Latinos are still staunchly Democrats. It's just that there's that changed a little bit this year. The black vote didn't really change at all. I believe that it was still, wasn't it still 12%? Yeah. Wait. Yeah, 12% of African Americans in 2020 voted Trump, and 32% of Hispanics voted Trump. Yeah, Hispanics voted 52% to 46%. And then, yeah, it says Harris got 85% of the black vote. So, yeah, that means that Trump probably got around 12% again. In both 2024 and 2020, just under 8 in 10 black men supported the Democratic presidential nominee. Yeah, so it's probably just the same as it was before. So I don't know what Harris is he's talking about. The Hispanic vote went up about 10%, and then it looks like the black vote is exactly the same.
Majority of Latino men and women, even after everything he has said about immigrants from Latin America.
He didn't get a majority of black men or Latino men and women. What is he talking about?
Majority of Latino men nationwide. And in some counties, he got a majority of Latino men.
Oh, some counties. Okay. That's such a weird way to put it. Okay.
Men and women, even after everything he has said about immigrants from Latin America over the years. How they're, quote, poisoning the blood of our people, which is right out of Mein Kampf. A comedian calls Puerto Rico a pile of garbage at a Trump rally, and the entire Democratic machine and all of liberal media seize upon it like a nuclear bomb has just vaporized an American city, and no one cared. Identity politics is dead, and we have to bury it. Okay, there's one species of identity politics that had an enormous...
Is that copyright? Yes. Make sure you guys donate to me because I'm losing all my monetization today.
...effect on this election, and most Democrats don't seem to realize it. Around 0.5% of American adults identify as transgender or non-binary. That's 1 in 200 people. And yet the activism around this identity has deranged our politics for as long as Trump has been in politics. I would be quick to draw from this election is that Americans aren't really into seeing biological men punch women in the face at the Olympics. And if that sounds like transphobia to you, you're the problem. Political equality, which we should want for everyone, does not mean that trans women are women. Trans women are people and should have all the political freedom of people. But to say that they are women and that making any distinction between them and biological women for any purpose is...
Okay, Harris campaign has offered trans people almost nothing. Here, I was about to say, I'm almost positive they never even fucking talked about trans people, unless it was like Fox News asking about trans people. Outside of that, they never really talked about trans people during her campaign. Kamala Harris does not, in fact, want to do transgender operations on illegal aliens in prison, and that's too bad. In a 2019 ACLU survey, the current Democratic presidential nominee said that she supported gender-affirming care for all trans adults, even those who were incarcerated in prisons for ICE facilities. After Donald Trump brought the topic up during September's presidential debate, the ACLU's Chase Strangio described this care as a constitutional right. The New York Times called Trump's comments the wildest sounding attack line that was basically true. Harris, meanwhile, seems to have walked back her 2019 stance, with her campaign telling Fox that questionnaire is not what she was proposing or running on. This is perhaps unsurprising. As a senator, Harris aggressively backed anti-sex work legislation like SESTA, FOSTA, and in 2015, when she was California's Attorney General, her office pushed to deny incarcerated trans women Michelle Norsworthy plea for a gender-affirming care while she was being held in a men's prison. As MSNBC columnist Caitlin Burns recalled, Harris' explanation was that she had fought internally within her department to support providing gender-affirming care for prisoners, even as her office led the legal argument against providing such care. Okay, now, under Trump, U.S. prisons offered gender-affirming care. Why? Because that's just part of the law. Prisons have to provide health care. So that's not something she ran on. That's just something that's true. Like, it's just something that is. The Trump administration's approach is notable in light of a campaign ad that slams Vice President Kamala Harris for supporting taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for prisoners and migrants. Says, but the Trump administration's record on providing services for transgender people in the sprawling federal prison system, which houses thousands of undocumented immigrants awaiting trial or deportations, is more nuanced than the 30-second spot suggested. Trump appointees at the Bureau of Prisons, a division of the Justice Department, provided an array of gender-affirming treatments, including hormone therapy, for a small group of inmates who requested it during Trump's 4 years in prison.
Is a thought crime and an act of bigotry. That is the precept of a new religion, and it's a religion that most Americans want nothing to do with. I want to be very clear about this. I have no doubt that there are real cases of gender dysphoria, and for those people, we should want to give them all the help they need to feel comfortable in their own bodies and in society. How we think about this, how we understand it scientifically, all of that.
Oh, by the way, Mantis, thank you for joining the memberships again. I forgot that was up, I think, while I was talking to Ninja. So, appreciate it.
Is still in flux. But there are 4-year-olds who, apropos of nothing, will claim to be in the wrong body. They're born a boy, but they insist that they're really girls, and they never waver from this. And it's pretty obvious in those cases that something is going on neurologically, hormonally, at the core of their being that is not a matter of them having been influenced by the culture. But conversely, there now seem to be countless examples where the possibility of social contagion is obvious, where due to the success of trans activists in changing institutions, these kids are effectively in a cult, being brainwashed by a new orthodoxy. These are radically different cases, and we should not be bullied into considering them to be the same. I've spoken to many Democrats in recent years and over the course of this election, and a shocking percentage of them imagine that all the controversy about trans rights and gender identity in kids is just right-wing bigotry and a non-issue politically, whereas it is obvious that
it is a non-issue. It is a non-issue. There's not a whole lot going on there. Democrats are not running around talking about trans issues all the time. Democrats are not making a big deal about whether or not you use preferred pronouns. This isn't happening. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
that for millions of Americans, it might as well have been the only issue in this election. Not because they are transphobic assholes, but because they simply do not accept the new metaphysics and even new biology mandated by trans activists and the institutions that they have successfully bullied and captured.
Nah, dude. Nah, bruh. When you see Trump taking a non-issue like immigration and making a big deal about it and acting like it's this like horrible issue that everybody needs to fix, and you're willing to look at that and say that he's racist because of this shit, like Sam Harris just did. But then when you turn to trans issues and you're like, yeah, but this one, oh man, Americans really see this as a big issue and they're not transphobic just because. No, that is the point, is that they're making a big deal about something that's not a big deal. They're making trans issues seem like it's something that is that's causing a whole lot of problems all over the place, and it's just not. Like, it's just not a real issue. It's not a real problem. It's not something that people are really like being affected by. This is so weird, dude, that like he can take that thought process for one of these things and not the other.
And it's important to say that not all trans people agree with what these activists say and do. Having the thought police suddenly proscribe the use of the term woman and demanding that we speak instead of birthing person or menstruators or people with ovaries or some other Orwellian construction designed to test everyone's patience and sanity. The sight of people being deplatformed on social media or fired from universities for merely stating that there are two biological sexes. I actually know a professor who lost her job at Harvard over this. Witnessing an epidemic of gender confusion spread through our schools, when people with their own eyes could see that this was a social contagion, being encouraged by the schools themselves, the ultimate fruition of which in many cases is irreversible medical procedures. We've got an epidemic of teenage girls wanting double mastectomies, and some are actually getting them based on ideas being spread on TikTok. And any parent who resists this trend gets demonized and under certain conditions could lose custody of their kids.
Oh, brother.
Well, congratulations, Democrats. You have found the most annoying thing in the fucking galaxy and hung it around your necks. I know people who haven't been touched by this issue personally, for whom it was the only issue that decided their vote. In fact, it is the issue that fully radicalized Elon, right? And he's spoken about this at length. Do you think Elon continuously messaging to 200 million people on X and going to Trump's rallies and donating over $100 million to the campaign and supporting him on podcasts and doing everything else in his power to get Trump elected might have accounted for a few votes? Honestly, I think a doctoral dissertation, and perhaps several, could be written on how trans activism completely destroyed Democratic politics, without most Democrats knowing. Of course, people will be doing an autopsy on this election for quite some time, but there is some polling already that suggests that cultural issues in general, and this issue in particular.
He's talking about the Elon Musk thing because Elon Musk has a trans daughter, I believe, that he's pretty much disowned and apparently like didn't want to talk to or engage with because they transition. And that he's been actually like insanely rude, and I would say, just from the little bit that I've seen, probably even abusive in the ways that he's engaged with his own child. Like, as much as you might have issues with trans stuff, to fucking like not even talk to your own kids over that sort of thing. That's I can totally understand you having a whole lot of problems with your kid transitioning, whether they have gender dysphoria or not, even if they really do. Like, even if they really have it, I could totally understand you having issues with this and struggling with your kid transitioning. Like, that has got to be a really hard thing to go through as a parent. It seems like your kid, their entire identity and the way that you view them and the way that you raise them and everything is just out the window and starting over. They just hit the reset button. But to not ever talk to them again and to just like disown them and all that, like that, bruh, that is something else. That is wokeism to the other degree. Like, people want to complain about the fact that, oh, if I vote for Trump, my own father won't talk to me anymore or something like that. Motherfucker, you're over here praising Elon Musk, who won't talk to his own kid just because they fucking transitioned. Like, come on. Give me a break.
Were the greatest drivers of swing voters turning to Trump. For the purpose of this poll, a swing voter is defined as those who are undecided in the presidential race or who have changed their voting preference since 2020, voting Democrat in one election and Republican in the other, or they were independents who had either indicated that they split their votes between Democrats and Republicans or who hold either a favorable or unfavorable view of both Trump and Harris. Right, so these were the people whose votes were in play. And according to this poll over at blueprint2024.com, titled Why America Chose Trump, Inflation, Immigration, and the Democratic Brand, when you segment the respondents in this way, for these swing voters, the strongest predictor of a vote for Trump was their response to the following statement. Kamala Harris is focused more on cultural issues like transgender issues rather than helping the middle class. Right, so transgender issues are flagged as the example of progressive politics in the Democratic Party. Now, you might want to say that neither Harris nor Biden campaigned as a vocal trans activist.
Okay, there you go.
And that's true. But honestly, if you wanted to account for Harris's loss and Trump's win in the briefest possible space, and also indicate the hold that the far left has had over Democratic politics and the Biden administration, I think it would be hard to do better than to juxtapose the following two facts. On his first day in office, President Biden signed an executive order ensuring that trans girls could have access to girls' restrooms, locker rooms, and girls' sports. It took him 2.5 years to sign an executive order addressing the chaos at the southern border. Why did he wait so long? Because the far left has always said that a concern about the southern border is racist.
Oh my goodness.
What more needs to be said about the degree to which the Democratic Party and the Biden administration lost touch with the will of the American people? As for the topic of trans rights and gender dysphoria, what Harris needed to do, at a minimum, is express her understanding that this issue is complex, that there's a legitimate concern about social contagion, that in certain cases there's a conflict between giving trans women and girls everything they want and protecting the rights of biological women and girls. And the jury is still out on many questions here, and policy in Europe has changed radically in recent years for understandable reasons, right? This topic is a total mess ethically and politically, and the orthodoxy among Democrats and in the elite institutions that they have influenced is that the trans activist line is the only ethical line to take. But the truth is, every shibboleth that came out of the far left in recent years contains within it the same recipe for the destruction of democratic politics. Each is like an evil hologram. I mean, take the term Latinx. Who was that for?
Oh my
Only
goodness.
3%.
I don't know if I can do this, bro. This is... He sounds like one of them or Anna Kasparian. Yeah. I don't, like, this is insane. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about here. Like, he has no idea the fact that Biden had tons of executive orders in his first couple months having to do with the border. He has no idea that, like, and he even admitted that they were never like campaigning on these issues. These weren't things that like actual Democrats are running on or trying to get passed or are like pushing into the zeitgeist. Like, this just isn't. See what I mean when I said I was surprised by his takeaway? This is all a bit mind blowing, dude. This is a bit mind blowing. Like, I know that he does this stuff, and I know that he loves like the culture war bullshit, but I expected him to talk about the fact that Republicans were lying about all of this shit and making a big deal about all of this stuff when it's just not a real issue. But instead, he drank the fucking Kool-Aid. This is so weird.
Of Latinos are in favor of this silly rebranding of their ethnicity. Again, Trump did better among Latinos than any Republican in memory. Do you think it was because there wasn't enough identity politics rammed down their throats from the left? Do you think they just need to see some more white people admonished for the sin of cultural appropriation?
No, I don't think that they're against identity politics whatsoever. I think that they just like their brand of identity politics, but they don't give a fuck about identity politics in general. I think that Trump actually was running on identity politics more than anybody else.
You think another lecture about sensitive Halloween costumes might do the trick? Much of Democratic politics has become a bad SNL sketch. Democrats simply have to understand that this is one of the reasons that we're getting 4 more years of Donald Trump. 4 more years of this man holding more power and responsibility than any person on earth. If it sounds like I'm blaming far-left activists for this, along with everyone who bent the knee to them, I am. Sure, inflation didn't help.
Like, it's weird as fuck too, because I'm the person who's sitting over here saying that this is really annoying. How Kamala Harris was like willing to have like progressive policies, and that she was willing to like that she was a bit too progressive, and I think that turned people off. And then I also think that it's even worse that she was so progressive, yet progressives still turned around and said that she wasn't progressive enough, and therefore they didn't want to vote for her. I've even seen a bunch of progressives say that they would rather vote for Donald Trump than her, because at least he's a populist. Like, this is so stupid that she was willing to like keep appeasing them instead of the center, yet none of this shit's my fucking issue. None of this. He's going after all of the like the shit that like Matt Walsh is going to make a big deal about that doesn't actually exist. And none of these things are actual problems. None of these things are things that like Kamala was campaigning on. None of these things this isn't shit that she was running around talking about or shoving in people's faces or trying to ram down their throats. Like, this just didn't happen. And it should, like, the whole point should be is like, yeah, like she was too progressive on some of the policies that she was pushing and some of the things that she was talking about, and that progressives didn't vote for her in the end. But if we're going to talk about these issues, well, the only reason to talk about these issues is just to say that Donald Trump wouldn't stop talking about these issues, that Donald Trump was always talking about these issues, and that he was lying about these issues, and that he was trying to pretend that they were issues. But instead, yeah, he's sitting here like acting like this is a real problem, just because like a survey included that as the cultural issue in their question, saying, you know, I believe Kamala Harris is more worried about issues about trans people. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean that the Democratic Party did anything wrong. This just means that Trump is able to like lie and manipulate people into believing that this is something that Kamala Harris is talking about or something that she believes. That's it.
But the Harris campaign and the Democratic Party couldn't change the price of groceries. They could control whether the vice president gave a rational accounting of why she no longer supports taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries for undocumented immigrants in detention. You know how many ads the Trump campaign ran on that issue? In some markets, it was 1/3 of their ad spend. She's for they, them. He's for you. Someone find me the video where Harris made any sense at all on this topic. And the same can be said for all the other cultural issues that have been poisoned.
How about the one where she literally said, I'm not running on that, but Donald Trump is the one who signed it into legislation? How about that video? Somebody send him that one. What the fuck is he talking about?
Let me ask you this question, very broadly speaking here.
Sure.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is a decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary. I'm not going to put myself in the position of a doctor.
Let me ask you this.
This is, that makes sense to me. She says, yeah, the law already says that's what it is. I'm okay with that. Like, that makes sense. What's wrong with that one? I'm trying to find, I think it's, I want to say, I thought it was the Fox News one.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery. For prisoners. For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides.
That, I feel like this makes sense. What is wrong with this? How is this not? How does that not make sense? How does Sam Harris not know that this makes sense? How does he, if he says he hasn't seen a video of any of these things, he wants to see a video where it makes sense? How about those two? How about those two videos? That makes fine sense there. This is not something that she did a poor job on. This is not something that she was too progressive on. This is not something that she was too woke on or too far left on. This is not one of those things. Again, like, my issue is definitely going to be with a lot of the progressive rhetoric and a lot of the ways the progressives didn't vote. This is not it. This is not it. This is not one of those things. I don't know what Sam's talking about.
By the far left. Literally everyone I know who voted for Trump, and this includes some extraordinarily influential people, like Elon, literally everyone was focused on cultural issues. It wasn't inflation for them. It was trans activism.
Oh, brother. Oh, brother. Why? Why is he like this? She thinks illegal aliens and people in prison should be able to medically transition. The law states that while people are in prison, they have to continue the medical regimens that they're already on. So if somebody is already taking HRT in puberty blockers and something like that, and they go to prison, it will dramatically fuck up their body and their body chemistry if they start to if they just cut that off while they're in prison. They will have serious long-term issues if they just stop it while they're in prison. So that would be illegal. That would be against the law. The feds have to continue giving them that medication. That's not controversial. That's pretty simple. Like, if you're on pain medication and you go to prison, they're not allowed to just be like, "Oh, sorry, you don't get to take it." I didn't hear the part where they said they were already transitioning before. Okay. Do you think that, like, when we're talking about trans people, do you think we're just talking about, like, cosmetic surgeries where they're just like, "Oh, I just want to have tits, so now the prison has to pay for it"? No, we're talking about people who are diagnosed with medical issues, right? We're talking about medicine. We're talking about you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. You have doctors. You have people who are giving you prescriptions. Yes, of course, there is a diagnosis there. Of course, they have to already have these in place. They're not going and diagnosing people in prison, and they're not there saying like, oh, you just feel like having tits? Well, we'll give them to you then. Like, no, this is doctors. These are medical issues. That's what it is. It has nothing. It's not that they're just like randomly deciding to transition while they're locked up.
The insanity at the southern border, and DEI policies, and homelessness and crime in our cities, and the unwillingness of Democratic DAs and mayors to do anything about it. The fact that when you go into a CVS and you need to call a locksmith to liberate some razor blades and Tylenol, that is an absolute disgrace. It is a clear degradation of the quality of life in American cities. And these things mattered on Tuesday when people went to the polls. And most of our largest cities are run by Democratic mayors, at least 2/3 of the top 100.
All right. Most important issues for voters in the United States as of October 2024. Number 1, inflation. Whoa! Number 1, inflation. Number 2, immigration. Whoa! Number 3, jobs and the economy. Whoa! Fucking shit! Oh my goodness! That's fucking crazy that it's literally the exact opposite of what he just said. It's literally the exact opposite of what it is that Sam Harris just said. Mind-blowing. Oh my goodness. What? Well, let's just fuck all that. Let's just go listen to what it is that Elon Musk had to say on this. Why don't we just do that? Let's just forget this. Let's just see what Elon Musk said about it.
I think it's a higher percentage of the top 20. What are the Democrats doing about homelessness? The Democratic Party largely owns this problem. And for years, Democrats have been acting like the answer to it is for everyone just to become more tolerant. They won't police the streets, but they'll police the language. These people are not homeless. They're unhoused. Okay, great. Anyone who lives in a city who has to shepherd their kids past some raving lunatic standing outside the supermarket, or who knows that there are whole sections of town that he shouldn't even set foot in because they look like the third act of a zombie movie?
He's talking about progressives. He's talking about progressive issues. These were not the progressive issues that she ran on. These are not progressive issues that she talked about. I don't know what the hell he's getting at. He's just talking about the fact that, like, yes, there's a bunch of Democrats that say crazy shit. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, hey, you know what? If Donald Trump lost, are we gonna go look at Nick Fuentes and his followers and be like, they're the reason Donald Trump lost the election? They're all saying a bunch of crazy stuff. They're pushing a bunch of insanity. Like, no, nobody's going to do that. But for some reason, when it comes to the Democrats, you got to go take like a minority of their party and then blame the issues that they're talking about on Kamala Harris's loss when Kamala Harris didn't run on any of those things. It doesn't make sense. Tomfoolery Show, the only way this episode from Sam makes sense is if you're traumatized from 2015. Yes, if you're still the fucking culture warrior from 2015 and you're stuck in Gamergate, then this will make sense to you.
Many of these people are done with your politics, and so are millions who don't live in big cities, but visit them, or just see the images on social media. No one wants to live like this. This is the sort of issue that was easily and justifiably weaponized against Democrats in this election. Or take the Hamas supporters on our college campuses. You don't have to be Jewish to see how shameful this is. This is an assault not just on Jews and Israel, but on Western civilization. Or let's just call it what it is, real civilization. If the Democratic Party can't figure out that civilization needs to be defended from barbarism, what do you expect is going to happen in a presidential election? Yes, Biden and Harris were not terrible on this issue, but they talked out of both sides of their mouths. They bent over backwards to not offend the people who are totally confused in the Democratic Party about what happened on October 7th and about the problem of Islamism and jihadism worldwide, who think in terms of Islamophobia rather than really protecting human rights. Here's one clue on the path back to sanity on this issue, which you may have missed. The hijab is not a symbol of female empowerment. Most of the women throughout the world who wear the veil are forced to by men who will beat the shit out of them.
I fucking swear, dude. I can't believe he's actually doing this. I cannot believe he's doing this. He literally just brought up Latinx and hijabs being women empowerment. He's arguing against fucking TikTok videos from libs of TikTok. He is arguing against he's arguing against Matt Walsh here and What is a Woman. Like, he's arguing against people fear-mongering about the dumbest among us. These are exceptions. These are not the party. These are not the people that are representing anybody with a loud voice. This is not somebody that is being elected into like Congress or the presidential office. You're talking about fucking teenagers and crazies on TikTok, and you're blaming the reason. You're saying the reason Kamala Harris lost is because of randoms on TikTok. I can't believe this. This is childlike thought processes. I expected so much more from Sam Harris here, and I'm actually blown away that he is buying into the insane fear-mongering about these issues as though they're real problems. This is like the other day when Andrew Wilson comes on here trying to tell me that the Democrats are trying to get rid of the Electoral College. And then when I try to get an example from him, he names off a bunch of streamers and TikTokers. And then even in the comments, there's a bunch more people in the comments going, Tom, what do you mean that they're not trying to get rid of the Electoral College? Did you not see this one TikToker named Parker who said that he didn't like it? It's like, you gotta be kidding me, bro. Shut the fuck up. That's not, those people don't have power. They're not representing anybody. Tom, ideology is entrenched regardless of temporal facts. Human beings operate on grand narratives that underpin the semantic networks underlying linguistic cognitive processes. You know, I do, but that's why I'm saying is that I expect more from Sam Harris. I understand why some people may have these like underpinnings, but he's not going to turn around and do the same thing if Donald Trump loses and say he lost because of Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. He's not going to do that. He's not going to say Donald Trump lost because Nick Fuentes ran around saying your body, my choice. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do it. He's not going to turn around and take like all of the crazies from the right wing and say this is why Donald Trump lost. But for some reason, with Democrats, they are always responsible for the minorities and the crazies, and it's just it doesn't make sense, dude. It does not make sense. You just agree with Sam about how bad Trump is. Sam has not changed, so I don't know why you would expect something different. Sam was always anti-PC, etc., and a culture war dude. Maybe he was. I don't know. I feel like he's had a lot of dumb takes on a lot of this stuff, but I felt like he was still pretty well grounded anyways. Like, I know that everybody freaked out about the stuff that he had to say about, like, Muslims and I guess it was just Muslims, yeah. But he even just mentioned, like, Trump's Muslim ban as, like, a problem with Trump, yet is still gonna do this, like, culture war thing with the hijab. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Of them if they don't. It might be time to figure this out, if you actually care, or want to credibly pretend to care about the rights of women on planet Earth.
No, I haven't
There's
seen
simply
it
no
yet.
question that Democratic moral confusion on many of these issues cost Harris millions of votes. So that's the reckoning that has to happen now among Democrats, and I hope it does. But the concern now is that 4 more years of Trump and Trumpism will prevent it.
Okay, at least that statement I can at least understand. That statement I can, if he started off by saying, look, there is confusion as to where everybody stands on this. And the fact that Democrats have not staunchly enough fought back against the, more insane parts of their party, and that gives Trump the ability to conflate them with the insane people, then now this is gathered up as one conceptual idea of who they are, and it's going to affect her electability. Sure, I can understand that to some extent, but the fact that, like, he brought up the fact that she didn't have any good answers about the like transitions in surgery and shit like that, which is just bullshit. He's just wrong. Like, He's just wrong on that. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And so he is still blaming her for those sorts of things when, those are not things that he's blaming on some random TikTok kid. He's blaming her for that. Obviously, there is like what do they call it? A cultural shit where a bunch of people think they're trans just because it's like cool or whatever. Social contagion, yes. The fact that there is like some sort of social contagion is true. The fact that it's like a massive thing, no, that's not a massive thing. That's not a huge problem. People are supposed to be getting like diagnoses and prescriptions and shit like that from doctors. If somebody as an adult decides that they feel like they're trans, and instead of going to the doctor, they just go and get a bunch of surgeries instead, they're allowed to do that. That's fucking insane. That's kind of ridiculous that they would just go and make permanent changes to their body without actually getting a diagnosis for gender dysphoria. But the social contagion part isn't like he's taking the social contagion and then comparing this or acting like permanent changes to your body is the likely outcome. That's not true. The social contagion has nothing to do with permanent changes to your body as a teenager. That's not true. The social contagion is more about the fact that people are identifying as non-binary at high rates and then saying, oh yeah, no, I'm not really one or the other. Those people aren't going and getting breasts or vaginoplasty or something like that. Tom, that is way more open question among people who study psychology. Wait, what is? You said that is. I don't know what that is. Sam is obviously going to have a huge issue with the far left over Palestine, and he is in general a free speech anti-PC dude. But I would have agreed with him if he had brought up the Palestine thing. That was one of my criticisms. The fact that I didn't feel like she pushed back against like the hardcore Palestine protesters enough, and that she gave like middle of the road answers for those sorts of things and tried to play both sides on that a little bit to where it wasn't really clear where it was that she stood, and that she lost a lot of Jewish voters and people who were like staunch Israel voters over that sort of stuff. I agree with that part. If he had brought up the Palestinian stuff, that would have made sense. But so far he literally says that nobody cared about the economy. Nobody cared about immigration. They cared about trans people. We're talking about like 1% of our fucking country. And that's the thing that everybody's freaking out about is 1% of our country. Give me a break. The degree to which social contagion impacts development. Wait, hold on. I'm saying that it's not having some sort of like, that they're not turning around and getting physical, body changing, like lifelong altering surgeries and shit, which is what he was making it sound like. It's like the social contagion is making it to where they're going out and making life-changing decisions. And I don't agree with this. I don't think that like the social contagion is that, because those people aren't able to just go get an easy diagnosis to transition.
Trump is such a provocation to the left and to liberal institutions that Democrats could find themselves doubling down on all their delusions. Needless to say, this will be exactly what Trump and the MAGA cult want, because it will be politically suicidal.
There's no double down.
If you are a Democrat who voted for Harris, please absorb this. You lost more people of color than you ever have in a presidential election while running against.
Yeah, it was because of Latinx. That's what it was. You lost people of color because of Latinx, even though that trend died before Biden ever got elected into office. The Latinx thing was dead for years before Biden ever got into office. I'm pretty sure it was dead before Trump ever got into office. The Latinx thing was dead long before any of these people were ever in politics. Yet he's bringing this up as an issue as to why Hispanic people didn't vote for Trump. He's bringing this up as an issue as to why Hispanic people didn't vote for Kamala Harris. No shot. They voted for Biden. They voted for Obama. That's when it was happening, right?
against Archie Bunker. Worse, Trump is actually supported by real racists and white supremacists. And that still wasn't enough of a problem. Who do you think your identity politics is for? You're really going to keep celebrating pornographers of racial grievance like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibram X. Kendi? Should we just give another Pulitzer Prize to the 1619 Project and congratulate ourselves? You really think racism is the problem in America? And what we saw this week was just a victory for white male identity politics? That's how you're going to explain Trump's popularity at this point? Trump gained support from every racial group except white people, right? Where he lost 1 percentage point when compared to 2020. You're going to chalk that up to racism? We're about 5 days out from the election when I'm recording this, and I'm still hearing prominent Democrats say things like, America was never going to elect a black woman for president in the year 2024. That's not the issue. And if you keep this up, you're going to get President Candace fucking Owens someday. Wouldn't that be a perfect rejoinder to this stupidity? I hope it's obvious from everything I've said and written for years, and from the first half of this podcast, that I understand the frustration and even revulsion that people feel for the far left, and for the progressive orthodoxy that has infected our institutions, for the censoriousness and thought policing, and the gaslighting and the lying. I understand the degree to which our institutions have been bent by this. And anyone who's followed my work from the beginning knows that I've been outraged by this encroaching moral blindness for at least 20 years, right? Long before wokeness, or Black Lives Matter, or trans activism, or defund the police. In the years after September 11th, 2001.
Yes, again, like these are all things that I would agree with. But Biden got elected, bro. Biden got elected, homie. Like, that's all over. That shit happened under Trump. You're naming things that happened under Trump, and Biden still got elected.
When I began to focus on the problem of Islamism and jihadism, I was complaining about just this. I could see that anyone who described these problems too honestly would get tarred as a racist, as though that made any sense. I saw how someone like Ayaan Hirsi Ali was treated like an untouchable by left-wing think tanks and liberal writers. How even Nicholas Kristof at the New York Times, whose whole shtick was to show his concern about the rights of women in the developing world, even he felt obliged to condemn Ayaan as an Islamophobe. This is a woman who is quite literally being hunted by Muslim theocrats in one of the most cosmopolitan societies we have, modern Holland. For years, I witnessed journalists obfuscate about the threat of Islamic extremism. Someone was found just stabbing people in a European city or mowing them down with his car, shouting Allahu Akbar, and it would be reported that the motive for the crime was still mysterious, and the perpetrator would be described at most as an immigrant. Sometimes every detail like this was suppressed, and you'd have no idea what happened. Just random mass murder. Needless to say, this kind of politically correct dishonesty has since spread to many other topics, as the left-wing hatred of Western civilization and capitalism and white people has distorted everything left of center. Okay, I understand how infuriating this is, especially on an issue that touches your life directly. I know what it's like to read an article in the New York Times and to spot obvious lies. But the alternative to the failure of journalism simply isn't the fire hose of lies and half-truths and conspiracy theories that you find on X. Okay, and it's not the calculated and ever-present distortion you find in right-wing news channels that never had any journalistic standards to violate in the first place. There is simply no alternative to healthy institutions that maintain their credibility even when they make mistakes by reliably correcting their errors. Right? And when they fall short of this standard, they can be pressured to do better because they have intellectual and moral scruples. It's an imperfect process, but it's the best we've got. Elon Musk never corrects his errors. Tucker Carlson never corrects his errors. Donald Trump never...
You just say Tucker Carlson?
...makes errors because he never stops lying. He's playing tennis without the net, and his fans love it. Putting your faith in deranged personalities isn't a viable alternative to having truly liberal institutions that you can trust and that can be obliged to earn your trust back when they fail. I understand how satisfying it is to find a new bully to beat up the other bullies who've been making you miserable. Okay, but the problem is this new bully is worse. Right? This new bully has no principles. This new bully has no journalistic or academic or scientific conscience to appeal to. Whatever might be wrong with a person like Anthony Fauci or Francis Collins or any of the other doctors who have been demonized right of center for their approach to setting COVID policy, at least they are real doctors and scientists who have some professional scruples and reputations to protect among people who actually know something about medical science. RFK Jr. has none of that. He's just a cowboy taking shots at the establishment. The Joe Rogan podcast is not a substitute for the Wall Street Journal or the Kennedy School at Harvard. It is simply not progress to have a comedian like Dave Smith, who's apparently done his own research, interviewed about the history of the Middle East or the war in Ukraine,
his own research,
like he's the next Henry Kissinger. All of this free access to information is making us dumber. Now, of course, I blame Trump and social media for how divisive our politics have become. Trump is what you get when 51% of a society just declares bankruptcy on core moral values and political principles and journalistic ethics and necessary institutions. There is no real defense of Trump and Trumpism. All his defenders act like his critics just don't like the man's style. He's just too crass or bombastic. Or they think we're worried about hypothetical things that might never happen. We're worried he might become a fascist in the future. And needless to say, these concerns are telltale signs of Trump derangement syndrome. But none of that is true. Right? The problem with Trump isn't his style, and it's not merely what might happen in the future. The problem is what has already happened. It's the damage that Trump has already caused to our democracy. And it's the fact that he has turned the Republican Party into a personality cult that celebrates all this damage as a sign of progress. For instance, while many of us really wanted Kamala Harris to win on Tuesday, we are also breathing a sigh of relief that she didn't win by a very narrow margin. Why are we relieved about this? Because Trump and Elon and several other high-profile freaks spread so many lies and conspiracy theories about election fraud that they effectively rigged our society to explode. On the day of the vote,
she did lose by a narrow margin. I don't know what he's talking about.
Trump and Elon were both spreading lies about a terrible fraud being perpetrated in Pennsylvania. Now that Trump won, where's the concern about fraud?
Yeah, Trump was already saying that there was fraud happening in the election during the actual election. He was running around saying that the election was stolen. I think that, yeah, I believe Trump won, so Jim Jordan's no longer worried about election fraud. Like, yes, this is what I keep saying to people. I'm like, oh no, wait, oh you're celebrating that Trump won? What happened? I thought you didn't believe in elections. No, you don't. No, you don't believe. You believe that anybody who wins was a lie. Like that. You believe Kamala won. Yeah, I think Trump won. You believe Kamala won because you don't believe in elections. The Republican congressman admitted the 2024 election was free and fair, but what changed between 2020 and now? Yeah, here we go. How U.S. election fraud claims changed as Trump won. In the build-up to Tuesday's U.S. election, claims of voter fraud flooded social media, but as Donald Trump's victory crystallized, the chatter largely subsided. The claims didn't stop entirely, however. A number of right-wing influencers and organizations pushing stories about cheating and rigged votes pointed to incomplete vote totals and continued to repeat discredited theories about the 2020 election. And disappointed Democratic Party supporters developed their own unsubstantiated voter fraud theories, some of which went viral on X, formerly Twitter, and other platforms. The reach of those posts nowhere near the dialogue content that circulated after Trump's loss in 2020. And with no support from losing candidate Kamala Harris or other Democratic Party officials, the chances seem slim of a large-scale movement developing along the lines of the Stop the Steal drive 4 years ago, which culminated in a riot at the U.S. Capitol. How did fraud claims develop on Election Day? The BBC tracked a huge wave of pre-election fraud claims that carried through Election Day and into the evening. These included claims of the vote being stolen in some key swing states, with exaggerated takes on real events being used in some cases to bolster the allegations. Early on Election Day in Cambria County, Pennsylvania, a Republican stronghold, there were problems with voting machines malfunctioning. The issues were fixed and voting hours in the affected areas were extended. However, many online immediately used the story to suggest nefarious activities were taking place. One post at 8:45 local time on Tuesday said, "The election steal is happening." Other rumors were spread in posts popped up through the day, including one around 2 p.m., which claimed ballots in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, had been pre-marked for Kamala Harris. In Milwaukee, the biggest city in the swing state of Wisconsin, election officials made a decision to rerun around 30,000 ballots out of an abundance of caution after doors on the back of voting machines were left open. One of the count was complete. It showed that support. Oh, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. This is fucking up. I'm having trouble with this. Once the count was complete, it showed that support for Harris had dropped compared with Joe Biden's 4 years earlier, which we all knew was going to happen. Everybody knew there was going to be less voters than there was in the 2020 election when there was mail-in ballots. Everybody knew that. Like many of the pro-Trump posters, Harris supporters pointed to real but isolated events, fires at ballot drop boxes in Washington and Oregon, and a series of fake bomb threats that disrupted voting at several polling locations on Election Day as evidence of widespread voter fraud. However, there was no evidence that the incidents significantly altered the vote or changed the outcome. Several posts from the Democratic Party activists questioning the results went viral and were seen by millions on X and other platforms. Unlike Trump's campaign in 2020, the Harris campaign and the top Democratic Party officials have not endorsed allegations of cheating or voter fraud. On Election Day, fraud rumors also came from President-elect Trump himself, who has repeatedly argued from the outset of his political career that the voting system is unfairly stacked against him. After just 4:30, Trump posted on his social media platform Truth Social a lot of talk about massive cheating in Philadelphia, law enforcement coming. The now president-elect did not give any details about the Philadelphia Police Department told BBC, verified that they were not aware what Trump was referring to. Seth Bluestein, the Republican city commissioner in Philadelphia, posted on X, "There is absolutely no truth to this allegation. It is yet another example of disinformation. Voting in Philadelphia has been safe and secure." Trump has not repeated the fraud allegations since Election Day. Yeah, of course not. We have contacted several hugely influential accounts that regularly posted about the election fraud claims in the build-up to the vote, but none of them replied. With data from Node XL, the BBC tracked accounts that engaged with Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Laura Trump, and Elon Musk on X around Election Day. Posts mentioning vote fraud at 3 o'clock on November 5th, but then dropped off significantly that evening and into the next day as polls closed and the results came in. Yeah, and this continues to go into the fact that they're still trying to claim that the election was attempted to be stolen from Donald Trump. So
it just evaporated. I guess Elon looked into it and our voting machines are fine now, right?
True.
Pay attention to what
He
happened
did his
here.
own research.
These guys imposed a serious risk of injury on our whole society for purely selfish reasons. And the fact that we're now relieved to have avoided a civil war is itself an injury to our democracy and to our social order. Is this too ethereal a point to understand? If someone rigs your house to explode, and the bomb just happens to not go off for reasons that they didn't actually control, it seems to me that they don't get to say, well, no harm, no foul. Let's just move on. Let's agree to disagree about what happened here. No, you put our whole democracy at risk with your lies. You knowingly raised the temperature and the pressure on your side of the electorate, again, with lies, and ran the risk of producing serious violence if things had gone the other way. I mean, honestly, there was a moment on Tuesday night when the tide had fully turned against Harris, when the needle over at the New York Times website was giving Trump an 89% probability of winning, but the blue wall states had not been decided, right? It was still possible at that point for Harris to win. 1 in 10 chance events happen all the time. But I remember thinking that I hope she doesn't win now. Because at that point, given the optics, given that Republicans really thought they had it in the bag, and that even Democrats seemed to think that, and thought that publicly, in plain view of everyone, on television and social media, if Harris's luck had turned at that point, and she had won, we could have had a civil war. Given the degree to which conspiracy thinking had been weaponized by Trump and his enablers, again, even on Election Day itself, these...
It was literally what I was saying. I was like, dude, we're in a no-win situation right now. Kamala wins, we probably have a fucking civil war on our hands. Trump wins, and Trump won. Like, we're just fucked.
Lies had been spread consciously, deliberately. Elon did this personally to hundreds of millions of people on the social media platform that he owns. Given all of that, honestly, I think it simply wasn't safe for Harris to win a free and fair election at that point. That is a totally crazy thought to have had on election night in America in the year 2024. Where do we send the bill for the damage that has been done to our country? Half of our society just elected a man to the presidency who they know would not have accepted the results of the election had he lost. Vice President Harris conceded the next day, as everyone knew she would. There is probably no one who supported Trump who thinks that he would have done what they fully expected Harris to do, which is to protect the most important norm of our democracy, the very thing that makes it possible, the peaceful transfer of power. And the astonishing thing is that Trump supporters are totally okay with this asymmetry. They expected Harris to concede and would have demanded that she do it, and yet they know Trump wouldn't have conceded if he lost, understanding all the risk this would have posed to our social fabric, and they are fine with that. That is already the ruination of our politics. That is what the path to fascism looks like. We are already on it. There is nothing hypothetical about this. Bad things have already happened. And this is true whatever happens over the next 4 years. It's like in the film, The Exorcist. If your kid has stigmata and is vomiting green goo in all directions and is moving furniture with her mind, you should admit that you have a problem. It shouldn't require Satan himself to make an appearance. What is so frustrating about Trump supporters is that they refuse to acknowledge any of this. They simply refuse to acknowledge how pathological our situation is and how pathological Trump himself has made it. Whatever story you have in your head about all the good Trump might do in a second term, he's a disruptor. He's got all the tech bros in there with him. He's just crazy enough to scare our enemies. Or he's just a bullshitter and he won't do half of what he claims he'll do, so don't worry about it. Whatever story you're telling yourself, here is what is true now. We are returning a man to the Oval Office who, as a sitting president, would not commit to a peaceful transfer of power, and who tried to steal the 2020 election, all the while claiming it was being stolen from him. And he has lied about this ever since, knowing that these lies stand as a continuous provocation to violence. And there are court cases pending, seeking to hold him accountable for all of this. Cases which, now that he'll be in control of the Justice Department, will be dismissed. We're putting Trump back in power when we know that he can't honestly discharge his oath of office because he has no respect for the Constitution. And half of our society is not only willing to run.
Again, Slim, he can't interfere there. He doesn't even have a way to interfere with the Georgia cases. He doesn't even have a way to do it. Like it's a state prosecution. So it's totally different. Like the federal charges, yeah, they likely have to drop those. We'll see, but those are going to be a lot more difficult because he can interfere with those things. He has power over the DOJ. Whereas in Georgia, those aren't federal charges. Those are state charges. So there's not really much that he can do about it. There's not really a way for him to interfere with it. They're just going to sit there and he's going to have them when he gets out.
Run this risk. They're positively jubilant about it. At a minimum, you should acknowledge that these events have seriously injured our politics. Again, whatever happens over the next 4 years. And I have something that I really must say to Joe Rogan and the other podcasters who interviewed Trump. You can't have it both ways. You don't get to say that this was the podcast election and that these long-form conversations are incredibly important for people to hear so that they can make up their mind about who to vote for, and then take no journalistic responsibility whatsoever to get your facts straight or to expose obvious lies when you're talking to the most prolific liar on earth. You don't get to spout endless conspiracy theories about how our election system is dangerously broken and vulnerable to fraud. And then when your candidate wins, say, oh, well, Trump's victory was just too big for them to rig the election.
Let's go.
How about realizing that there was nothing significantly wrong with our election system in the first place, and that all these concerns about fraud were lies coming from your candidate and his surrogates? And they were telling these lies in preparation for not accepting the results of the election had he lost. And you let your platform be used for that purpose by people who were willing to shatter our politics and even risk provoking a civil war out of personal self-interest. Every podcaster who interviewed Trump managed to make it seem like all the bad things that have ever been said about him were the result of some left-wing elite media conspiracy. Right? To interview Trump or his surrogates responsibly would have required that you put them on the spot for any number of odious things he has said.
Yeah, I mean, but that's Slim. I understand what you're saying, but that's why I was saying that I think that they should keep him. Like, I think that that's like even why I would expect the federal charges to stay as well. is because, yes, if he interferes with them, there's just going to be that many more arguments and that much more proof and that many more charges and shit like that. Like in the federal ones, like it's going to be hard for them to do anything because he's able to just kind of fire anybody who has anything to do with his charges. Whereas even though they have bosses in Georgia, the Georgia Attorney General is the one who outed Trump for asking them to find 13,000 votes. Like, he's the one who released the recording there. So the Attorney General of Georgia isn't going to turn around and fire anybody. He's the one who's been backing this. He's the one who's been backing this prosecution the entire time. So yeah, Georgia is just pretty stacked from top to bottom. And then on top of that, even our governor has been pretty anti-Trump and been getting into it with Trump lately. So yeah, I think that like from top to bottom, we're okay in Georgia. Tom, you're an idealist. You have principles. Populations, people do not. If a leader with fascistic tendencies has a mandate from the populist, they will overturn the institution that opposes them. Yeah, sure. I don't think that they can in this case. Like it has nothing to do with like being an idealist. It's more about pragmatism. I don't think he's capable of it. I don't think that there's a capable way unless he wants to go to war or something. Like, yeah, I don't think that he really has the ability to interfere in Georgia.
And done. And for things he said he intends to do in his second term, all of which are well documented, and many of which should be totally disqualifying in a presidential candidate. It's not enough to just turn on the microphones and have a conversation. And it doesn't matter that it's 3 hours long, if all you're going to do is launder the man's lies by ignoring them in the interests of maintaining good vibes. There is a complacency and an amorality to the way you approach this that was actively harmful. And all you people with Twitter files derangement syndrome, just how fair and balanced are things over there at X now? Is it the bastion of free speech you were hoping for? No. You think having a platform run by a manic billionaire who doesn't trust any of his own moderators to vet information, so he fires them, but trusts random conspiracists and lunatics, so he personally amplifies their lies to 200 million followers? You think this is progress? Do you think you'd feel the same way if a left-wing billionaire was boosting activist
They actually do. Yes, no, they actually do. They're like, wait, yeah, I don't want some random person being in charge of what's true. I don't want them deciding what is or isn't. That's not fair.
Garbage to his 200 million followers every hour on the hour? And perhaps a note to journalists and scientists and writers and people with actual reputations to protect and lives to live. None of this gets any better until you all decide to leave X. You know it's a cesspool. You know it's harming our society. Most of you know it's harming your lives personally. By merely being there and making it seem like everyone has to be there because everyone is there, you are helping to build the tool that is making fact-based conversation impossible. Our society is being riven by lies, and social media, and X in particular, is largely responsible for this. Of course, I get that some breaking news happens there first, and some news might only happen there. But if that's a feature of social media that we simply must conserve, well, then we have to instantiate it elsewhere, not on a platform owned and run.
Yeah, I was about to say, if there was another place for this to exist, that would make sense. But currently there isn't. And right now, especially when it comes to like content creators, when it comes to journalists, when it comes to people who actually need to engage in this sort of promotion and communication, they don't really have much of a choice. They don't really, like, there's no option there. They have to have something else.
Run and entirely dominated by a meme junkie who lost all of his principles years ago. Once again, everything I've been talking about and complaining about has already happened. But looking forward, of course, there are reasons to be worried about a second Trump term. Is RFK Jr. really going to be setting medical policy for the country? That should make your head explode. Is Trump going to weaken our international alliances? Will he pull us out of NATO? If we have fewer biological men in women's sports, are we also going to have fewer democracies? Is that a fair trade? Is Trump going to call the MyPillow guy and the Pizzagate dummies for advice on how to run the world? Or will he suddenly pivot and surround himself with competent, ethical advisors? Well, we'll have to wait and see, needless to say.
No, we're not going to have to wait and see. He's definitely not going to surround himself with ethical advisors. He doesn't want ethical advisors. He wants yes men. If he gets ethical advisors, they're going to tell him that he can't do the shit that he wants to do. He doesn't want any of that. He doesn't want checks and balances. He doesn't want people to hold him accountable. He wants people who are just going to do exactly what it is he tells them to. And that's it. And that's what a dictator is. That's what this is. And that's what fascism is. That's what that's what it is that we've all been talking about. It's the fact that he is just going to get MAGA loyalists. He's going to demand that they're loyal to him, and he's going to demand that they just do what it is he says, and that's the end of it. End of discussion. There is no hope that he's going to get competent people. But all right, I got to get off. I'll be back on tomorrow.